They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but in my experience, it's most satisfying when delivered in a boardroom with freshly signed acquisition papers. For 4 years, I lived in the shadow of my husband Ryan's supposed success while he and his colleagues treated my career aspirations like a cute hobby. None of them realized I was quietly building the very company that would eventually acquire their firm. That afternoon, as I watched them toast Ryan's latest promotion with champagne purchased from my secret accounts, I knew their time was finally running out. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The golden hour sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of our Oak Hill townhouse, casting warm highlights across our designer furniture. The open-concept living area buzzed with conversation and laughter, as Ryan held court among his executive friends. Crystal glasses clinked while catering staff, that I had secretly arranged, circulated with trays of hors d'oeuvres. I stood by the kitchen island, observing the scene with practiced detachment. My husband of 6 years commanded attention in his tailored navy suit, his confident gestures punctuating every sentence as he regaled his audience with tales of his latest business triumph. At 42, Ryan Mitchell had mastered the art of corporate charisma, perfectly styled hair with distinguished touches of silver at the temples, a smile that conveyed both authority and approachability, and the relaxed posture of someone who believed the world was designed to accommodate his ambitions. "Live, sweetheart," he called out, his voice carrying that familiar note of performative affection. "Why don't you tell everyone about that little online project you've been tinkering with?" The way he said tinkering made it sound like I was assembling craft projects rather than building sophisticated cybersecurity protocols. All eyes turned to me, expressions ranging from polite interest to barely concealed amusement. "It's just some cybersecurity work," I replied softly, playing my assigned role to perfection. I tucked a strand of my chestnut hair behind my ear, adopting the slightly embarrassed demeanor they had come to expect. Nathan Wilson, Ryan's closest friend and fellow VP at Pinnacle Solutions, barely contained his smirk. "Cybersecurity, huh? That's quite the ambitious hobby for someone with a—" He paused, searching for what he thought was a diplomatic phrase, a background in administrative work. His wife Diana patted his arm appreciatively, as if he'd demonstrated remarkable restraint. What they didn't know was that my administrative background was a carefully constructed fiction. My previous career as a senior security analyst for the Department of Defense had been deliberately obscured when I married Ryan, replaced with a vague history as an executive assistant who wanted to learn about technology. Ryan shot me a look that mixed affection with thinly veiled condescension. "Liv has always had interesting interests," he said, swirling his champagne. "Remember last month when she thought she could create a vulnerability assessment tool?" He turned to the group, eager to share another anecdote at my expense. What he didn't know was that the assessment tool he mocked had just been licensed to 3 Fortune 500 companies through Next Level Security, my own firm operating under a holding company with a different name. The licensing agreements worth $3 million were stored in my private cloud account, alongside documentation of every dismissive comment he and his colleagues had made about my capabilities. "At least she's trying," Diana offered with the false generosity of someone bestowing a compliment on a child's finger painting. As Pinnacle's HR director, she prided herself on her empathetic approach. "My brother's IT department is always looking for entry-level data entry people. It might be a good way to get your foot in the door, Liv." Murmurs of agreement floated through the room. I nodded appreciatively, as if her suggestion was both thoughtful and helpful, rather than profoundly patronizing. "Thank you, Diana. That's very kind," I replied, my voice measured and soft. The irony was delicious. Every person in that room worked for Pinnacle Solutions, the very company my firm was poised to acquire in exactly 9 days. While they clinked glasses celebrating Ryan's promotion to senior VP, The board of directors had already tentatively approved my acquisition offer. The due diligence was complete, the financing secured, and the transition plan meticulously outlined, all without a single person at Pinnacle knowing who was behind the deal. "Liv, be a dear and bring out that special bottle of Krug in the wine fridge," Ryan called out. "We should properly toast Mark's new client acquisition." Mark Thompson, Pinnacle's lead sales executive, beamed with pride. Little did he know that his supposedly brilliant deal had been subtly orchestrated by me through one of my shell companies. I had specifically designed that contract to look impressive, on paper while containing terms that would later give my company significant leverage. "Of course," I replied, heading to our temperature-controlled wine storage. Behind me, their conversation continued, peppered with technical jargon they assumed I wouldn't understand, and thinly veiled references to my cute attempts to break into their industry. As I selected the champagne, an $800 bottle Ryan believed he had purchased but had actually been a strategic gift from one of my business partners, I reflected on the meeting I'd had that morning. Seated in my real office in the converted warehouse space across town, I had finalized the last details of the Pinnacle acquisition with my executive team. "Are you absolutely certain about the timing?" Grace Rodriguez, my COO and closest confidant, had asked. "We could delay until after their quarterly reports." I had shaken my head, my decision firm. 9 days. Everything needs to happen exactly as planned. The acquisition wasn't just business. It had become personal 3 months ago when I discovered Ryan had emptied our joint savings account of $167,000 to help his mistress, Amber Collins, purchase a downtown condo. He had covered it with a story about a temporary transfer for investment purposes, not realizing I had already documented every transaction, every text message, and every afternoon meeting that actually took place at the Westlake Grand Hotel. Returning to the living room with the champagne, I caught the tail end of what must have been another joke at my expense. Ryan's laughter, sharp and performative, cut through the ambient conversation. "Oh God, you should have seen her trying to explain blockchain to me last week," he said, wiping an imaginary tear of mirth from his eye. "It was like watching a kindergartner explain quantum physics." Nathan leaned forward eagerly. "Please tell me you recorded it." "I was tempted," Ryan continued, his eyes glinting with malicious amusement. "She had drawn all these diagrams and practiced this whole presentation. It was adorable, really. What they didn't know was that I had already consulted on blockchain implementation for 2 major financial institutions, and the adorable diagrams Ryan mocked were simplified versions I'd created specifically because he had complained that my actual technical explanations went over his head. "Here's the champagne," I said quietly, placing the bottle on our marble kitchen island. Mark immediately reached for it, examining the label with exaggerated expertise. "Excellent choice, Ryan," he approved, completely unaware that I had selected it. "You really know how to celebrate a victory." Ryan preened under the compliment. "Well, someone in this household needs to have achievements worth celebrating," he said, throwing a pointed glance my way that drew more chuckles from the group. These monthly gatherings had become his stage, and I was his favorite prop, the supportive but slightly clueless wife he so generously indulged. The dynamic had been established early in our marriage when I had deliberately played into his need to feel intellectually superior. What had begun as a strategic decision to keep my actual capabilities hidden had evolved into a carefully documented case study in workplace and marital discrimination. Liv tried to apply for that entry-level security analyst position at Meridian Technologies last month, Ryan announced to the group, setting up another anecdote at my expense. "Tell them what happened, sweetheart." I adjusted my expression to one of mild embarrassment. "They said I wasn't qualified." "Not qualified," Ryan echoed with exaggerated indignation that barely masked his satisfaction. "She couldn't even get past the initial screening questions." The truth was more complex. Meridian Technologies was now one of Next Level's biggest clients, and I had intentionally submitted a subpar application through my Olivia Mitchell identity to maintain my cover. The real irony was that the security protocols Meridian now used had been designed by my team. As the evening progressed, the wine flowed freely, and the anecdotes about my supposed technical ineptitude became increasingly elaborate. I moved through these moments with practiced ease, offering self-deprecating smiles and slight blushes exactly when expected. "Liv, honey," Ryan called out again as the gathering was winding down. "Can you grab those financial reports I left in the study? I want to show Victor the projections for next quarter." Victor Harrington, Ryan's direct superior and Pinnacle's chief revenue officer, had arrived fashionably late. At 58. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. He carried himself with the confident detachment of someone who had been in executive positions long enough to believe it was his natural habitat. "Of course," I replied, heading toward the home office. Our study was a space that reflected Ryan's self-image. Dark wood, leather-bound books he'd never read, and framed awards prominently displayed. In the corner sat my small desk, deliberately modest compared to his imposing workstation. The contrast was part of our home's visual narrative. His success, my hobby. As I retrieved the report folder, I noticed a receipt that had fallen from it. A hotel bill from the Westlake Grand, a $470 charge for the presidential suite last Tuesday, when Ryan had told me he was at a client dinner. Another piece of evidence for my already substantial file. I slipped the receipt into my pocket and returned to the living room with the reports. "Here you go," I said, handing them to Ryan with a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. "Thanks, babe," he replied absently, already turning to Victor. "So, as you can see on page 4, we're projecting a 17% increase in enterprise contracts." I moved to the periphery of the conversation, watching as Ryan walked Victor through projections that I knew were fundamentally flawed. Pinnacle had been overvaluing their contracts and underestimating implementation costs for years, one of many reasons they were vulnerable to acquisition. As the night drew to a close and guests began to leave, I performed my role as the gracious hostess, thanking everyone for coming and accepting their condescending well wishes for my technology studies. "Keep at it, Liv," Diana said, patting my arm as if I were a persistent but mediocre marathon runner. "Everyone has to start somewhere." "Mark my words," Nathan added, already slightly drunk. "In a year or two, we might even find you a proper position at Pinnacle, maybe something in user testing or documentation." If only they knew that in 9 days I would be deciding their professional fates. After the last guest left, Ryan loosened his tie and collapsed onto our sofa, the self-satisfied smile still playing on his lips. "That went well," he declared, kicking off his shoes. Victor was impressed with the quarterly projections. "That's wonderful," I replied, beginning to gather empty glasses. "You must be pleased." He stretched, the picture of contented achievement. "This promotion is just the beginning, Liv. Victor hinted that they're grooming me for the C-suite. Another year or two, and we could be looking at a chief revenue officer position." The irony of his confidence made me pause momentarily before resuming my cleanup. In 9 days, Pinnacle Solutions would have an entirely different leadership structure. "That's exciting," I offered, my voice carefully modulated to convey supportive enthusiasm. "You've worked hard for this." Ryan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression shifting subtly before he turned it face down on the coffee table. I didn't need to see the screen to know it was Amber. Their communication patterns had become predictable: texts after social events, calls during his supposed lunch meetings, emails from his private account that he didn't realize I had been monitoring. "I'm heading up to bed," I said, gathering the last few glasses. "It's been a long day." "I'll be up in a bit," he replied distractedly, already reaching for his phone again. Need to respond to a few work emails first. In our bedroom, I changed into silk pajamas and performed my nightly routine with methodical precision. The mundane rituals of domestic life had become a kind of performance art, a carefully maintained facade hiding my true focus and capabilities. Once I heard Ryan settle into his home office chair downstairs, the creak of leather was distinctive. I retrieved my secured laptop from its hiding place inside my bedside table's false bottom. The specially designed compartment contained not only the computer, but also a secure phone and several encrypted flash drives documenting everything I needed for the upcoming revelation. Opening the laptop, I connected through a series of proxies to access next-level security's secure servers. Grace had left several updates. The final acquisition papers were ready for signatures, the transition team was assembled, and the board meeting was confirmed for the morning of the announcement. I sent a brief, encrypted response. Proceed as planned. No exceptions, no delays. This wasn't merely about business anymore. When Ryan had emptied our joint account to fund his mistress's condo, he hadn't just betrayed our marriage, he'd taken the money I had deliberately placed there as part of my cover. The fund transfer had been the catalyst that accelerated my timeline, transforming a potential business acquisition into something more personal. My phone vibrated with an incoming text from Grace. Final security brief complete. All teams in position for D-Day. I responded with a simple, confirmed, before deleting the exchange. A habit formed from years of careful compartmentalization. From downstairs, I heard Ryan laugh softly, undoubtedly texting Amber while believing I was none the wiser. The sound reinforced my resolve. In 9 days, the careful facade I had maintained would finally drop, revealing not just my professional capabilities, but the full extent of my awareness of his betrayals. I closed the laptop and returned it to its hiding place, then slipped between our Egyptian cotton sheets. Another luxury Ryan believed he had provided through his success. As I set my alarm for 5:30 a.m., I reflected on the journey that had led to this moment. 4 years ago, I wasn't Olivia Mitchell, the underestimated wife of an ambitious executive. I was Lieutenant Olivia Chen, a decorated cybersecurity specialist for the Department of Defense with high-level security clearance and a reputation for identifying vulnerabilities others missed. When a private security firm offered me the opportunity to lead their counterintelligence division, I had been on the verge of accepting. Then I met Ryan at the Tech Innovation Conference in San Francisco. He was charming, attentive, and surprisingly vulnerable when discussing his ambitions. What caught my attention wasn't his good looks or his confidence, but the way he treated the junior staff at his booth, dismissive, condescending, taking credit for their ideas while blaming them for any shortcomings. His behavior represented everything problematic about tech corporate culture, but also presented an unexpected opportunity. I had been looking for a way to understand how these toxic environments functioned from the inside, to eventually build something better. Ryan inadvertently offered me that window. Our whirlwind courtship and marriage coincided with my decision to leave government work and establish next-level security. To everyone, including Ryan, I presented this transition as taking a break from my administrative career to explore my interests in technology. He never questioned this narrative. It aligned perfectly with his perception of women in tech. The early days were challenging. I worked through nights in my hobby corner, while Ryan thought I was taking online courses in basic programming. Every time he mocked my supposed lack of technical understanding, I documented it, along with similar behavior from his colleagues. These records became part of a growing case study in how qualified women were systematically underestimated and marginalized in the industry. Meanwhile, next-level security grew rapidly, securing major contracts and developing innovative security solutions. I hired Grace, a brilliant strategist I'd worked with at the DoD, and assembled a team committed to both excellence and ethical business practices. Our company culture intentionally countered every toxic element I observed at Pinnacle. The revelation about Ryan's affair and financial betrayal shouldn't have surprised me, but somehow, the explicit evidence still stung. Finding the transfer confirmation for $167,000 to Amber's account, labeled as investment opportunity, had transformed my professional interest in acquiring Pinnacle into something more visceral, a chance to correct multiple injustices at once. As I drifted toward sleep, I thought about the carefully orchestrated sequence of events that would unfold in 9 days. The security teams were ready, the board members prepared, and the transition plan finalized down to the minute. Ryan and his colleagues were about to learn what happened when they underestimated the wrong woman. A calm certainty settled over me. The years of playing small, of being dismissed and patronized, were coming to an end. In 9 days, they would finally see me, not as Ryan's hobbyist wife, but as the architect of their professional future. My last thought before sleep claimed me was of the expression that would cross Ryan's face when he realized that the woman he had belittled for years was now his boss, and soon to be his ex-wife. Circle of doubt. The next morning arrived with the pale gold light of early autumn filtering through our bedroom blinds. I woke before my alarm, my mind already cycling through the day's carefully planned schedule. Ryan slept soundly beside me, his breathing deep and regular, completely unaware that I had already been awake for 20 minutes reviewing mental checklists. I slipped out of bed and into my running clothes, a deliberate choice that reinforced my image as someone trying to improve herself in ways Ryan found acceptable. Physical fitness he understood and encouraged, cybersecurity expertise he dismissed and belittled. The crisp morning air hit my face as I stepped outside our townhouse. Oak Hill was quiet at this hour, with only a few dedicated runners and walkers populating the tree-lined streets. I set off at a measured pace, my wireless earbuds not playing music as Ryan assumed, but connecting me to Grace for our daily security briefing. "Morning," her voice came through clearly. "The Meridian contract was finalized at midnight. Their CTO is ecstatic with the implementation plan." "Any issues with the timeline?" I asked, keeping my voice low as I passed another early riser walking their golden retriever. "None. The transition team reports everything remains on schedule for next week. The board meeting is confirmed for 9 a.m. on the day, followed by the announcement at 11. I increased my pace slightly, turning onto a quieter street. "And the documentation regarding Ryan's financial activities?" "Complete and verified. The transfer to Amber Collins has been thoroughly documented, along with the 17 other discrepancies we've identified in his expense reports to Pinnacle. Legal says it's more than enough to void any pre-nuptial protections." This was the part of my plan that had required the most careful consideration. The prenuptial agreement Ryan had insisted upon, believing he was protecting his assets from a spouse who earned significantly less, was about to become irrelevant in the face of documented financial misconduct. "Perfect," I replied, my breath measured despite the incline I was now tackling. "I'll be in the office by 10. Have the team prepare for the security protocol review at 11. I ended the call as I looped back toward our townhouse, timing my return to coincide with Ryan's usual wake-up routine. As expected, I found him in the kitchen preparing his protein shake, dressed in designer sweatpants and a fitted t-shirt that highlighted his gym-sculpted physique. "Morning, champ," he greeted, his tone carrying that particular blend of affection and condescension he reserved for me. "Good run?" "Very refreshing," I replied, pouring myself a glass of water. "How did you sleep?" "Like a rock. Yesterday's presentation to the board really took it out of me." He took a long sip of his shake, then added with a smirk, "Not that you'd understand the pressure of executive-level meetings." I smiled blandly, thinking of the 3 board meetings I had led the previous week, securing over $40 million in new financing for next level's expansion. "I can only imagine," I said, my voice appropriately impressed. Ryan checked his watch. The Rolex I had actually purchased through a roundabout series of transactions that made it appear to be from his bonus. I'm meeting Nathan at the club for a quick workout before heading to the office. We've got strategy planning all day for the Henderson acquisition. The Henderson acquisition, another piece of business intelligence I had been tracking. Pinnacle had been pursuing Henderson Tech for months, unaware that Next Level had already quietly secured a partnership agreement that would make Pinnacle's acquisition attempt futile. Sounds important, I offered. Will you be home for dinner? Don't count on it. These meetings could run late, and Victor might want to continue discussions over dinner. He didn't meet my eyes as he rinsed his shake container, a tell I had identified early in our relationship that signaled he was lying. I knew exactly where he would be that evening, meeting Amber at her recently purchased condo, the one funded with our joint savings. The real estate transaction had been finalized. 3 days ago, another piece of evidence neatly filed in my growing dossier. I understand, I said, infusing my voice with just the right amount of disappointment. I'll leave a plate in the fridge for you. Ryan crossed the kitchen and dropped a perfunctory kiss on my forehead. Don't wait up. And hey, he added with forced enthusiasm, how's that coding course going? The Python one? This was Ryan's version of taking interest in my hobby, asking vague questions about entry-level courses while clearly expecting answers that confirmed his perception of my limited technical abilities. It's challenging, I replied, falling into our familiar script. There's so much to learn. He patted my shoulder with the indulgent air of a parent encouraging a child's finger-painting efforts. Keep at it. Maybe someday you can help Pinnacle test some basic applications or something. The dismissive encouragement was so habitual he probably didn't even register how condescending it sounded anymore. 4 years of this had provided me with hundreds of similar exchanges, all documented and categorized in my records of workplace gender discrimination. That would be amazing, I replied, widening my eyes in fabricated enthusiasm. After Ryan left for his gym session with Nathan, I showered quickly and changed into what I thought of as my cover wardrobe, casual but neat attire that communicated aspiration without achievement. Nothing that would suggest executive presence or technical authority. By 9:30, I was in my car, not the luxury SUV Ryan drove, but a modest sedan that reinforced our perceived financial dynamic. 15 minutes later, I pulled into an underground parking garage 6 blocks from Next Level's actual headquarters. I took the elevator to the second floor, entered a small, unremarkable office, and proceeded through a series of security protocols that led to another elevator, this one requiring both biometric confirmation and a daily changing access code. This second elevator opened directly into my actual office on the 12th floor of what appeared from the outside to be a mixed-use building owned by a property management company, itself a subsidiary of one of my holding companies. Grace was waiting for me, tablet in hand, immaculately dressed in a charcoal suit that projected the professionalism I required from my executive team. The Meridian implementation team is requesting additional resources for the Frankfurt branch. She began without preamble, falling into step beside me as we walked toward the conference room. I've reviewed their projections and approved a 15% budget increase. Good, I nodded, mentally shifting into my authentic leadership mode, direct, decisive, and technically precise. What's the status on the Pinnacle acquisition? Packets? Finalized this morning. Each executive will receive personalized documentation detailing the leadership transition. Legal has verified all termination clauses for those we're not retaining. I paused at the entrance to the conference room where my senior team was already assembled. And Ryan's packet? Grace's expression remained professional, but I caught the slight tightening around her eyes that indicated controlled satisfaction. Prepared according to your specifications. Complete documentation of his financial misappropriations, expense account irregularities, and, of course, the unauthorized transfer to Ms. Collins. Perfect. I straightened my shoulders and entered the room, seamlessly transitioning from Olivia Mitchell, underestimated spouse, to Liv Chen, CEO of Next Level Security and soon-to-be owner of Pinnacle Solutions. The morning passed in a focused blur of strategic decisions and planning sessions. This was my real life, leading a team of brilliant security specialists, making multi-million-dollar decisions, and driving innovation in an industry still dominated by men who resembled Ryan and his colleagues in both their arrogance and their limitations. At 12:30, my secure phone buzzed with a text from our surveillance team. Subject proceeding to Westlake Grand for lunch meeting with AC. Ryan and Amber, right on schedule. Their Tuesday lunch dates had become predictable enough to set a corporate calendar by. I had initially authorized the surveillance as part of my divorce preparation, but it had quickly revealed patterns of behavior that impacted the Pinnacle acquisition as well. Ryan frequently discussed confidential company information during these rendezvous, oblivious to the fact that his indiscretion constituted serious security violations. I turned my attention back to the planning meeting, pushing thoughts of Ryan's betrayal aside to focus on the complex technical challenges my team was addressing. Unlike the superficial presentations I'd witnessed at Pinnacle, these discussions involved deep technical expertise and collaborative problem-solving. The distributed denial of service protection protocol needs refinement, noted Raj, my chief security architect. The recent simulation identified a vulnerability in how we handle traffic from certain Asian IP blocks. What if we implemented a geographic traffic analysis layer? I suggested, moving to the whiteboard to sketch a more resilient architecture. We could create dynamic response profiles based on regional attack signatures. For the next hour, we engaged in the kind of technical debate that Ryan believed was beyond my capabilities, developing solutions to cybersecurity challenges that most firms hadn't even identified yet. This was the work that had built Next Level into an industry leader, work I had performed while maintaining the fiction of being a novice struggling with basic Python tutorials. At 3:00 p.m., I transitioned to my next role of the day, meeting with the Next Level board to provide our quarterly performance update. Unlike the performance theater I had witnessed at Pinnacle, where style routinely trumped substance, these sessions involved rigorous analysis and thoughtful strategic planning. Our growth metrics have exceeded projections by 22%. I informed the board, navigating through detailed performance dashboards. The new Enterprise Security Suite has secured 18 major clients in the first 60 days, and our threat intelligence platform now monitors over 40 million endpoints globally. Eleanor Walsh, my most experienced board member and personal SOE mentor, leaned forward with a penetrating look. And the Pinnacle acquisition? Still on schedule for next week? Yes, I confirmed. All preparations are complete. Once the acquisition is announced, we'll implement immediate leadership changes and begin technology integration. Their client base will benefit from significant security upgrades and will retain their most talented staff while addressing the organizational culture issues we've identified. And the personal element? Eleanor asked carefully. She was one of the few people who knew the full extent of my connection to Pinnacle through Ryan. Handled separately and appropriately, I replied, my tone making it clear that this aspect, while important, would not interfere with sound business decisions. The transition will be executed according to plan regardless of personal considerations. The board meeting concluded at 5:15, with unanimous approval for our next quarter strategy. As the board members departed, Eleanor lingered, waiting until we were alone before speaking. "Liv," she said, her voice softening from its boardroom precision. "I've known you for nearly a decade. You're the most level-headed executive I've ever worked with. But this situation with Ryan..." She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "Are you certain you can separate the business decision from the personal betrayal?" I appreciated her concern. Eleanor had been my supervisor at the DoD before transitioning to the private sector herself. She had witnessed my rise through the cybersecurity ranks and had been an early investor in Next Level. Her mentorship had been invaluable, particularly in navigating the male-dominated environments we both operated within. The acquisition makes perfect business sense, I assured her. Pinnacle's client relationships and market position complement our technical capabilities. Their security vulnerabilities are significant but addressable. The cultural issues would need to be addressed regardless of my personal connection. Eleanor nodded, but her expression remained concerned. And Ryan? The revelation will be quite public. Ryan made his choices, I replied, my voice steady despite the flash of anger I felt. The $167,000 he transferred to his mistress was intended for our future family. Money I earned but allowed him to believe was his contribution. I paused, acknowledging the emotion before setting it aside. His professional fate will be determined by the same criteria we're applying to all Pinnacle executives: competence, integrity, and cultural fit. Eleanor's expression softened with understanding. Just remember that revenge, while temporarily satisfying, rarely provides lasting fulfillment. This isn't about revenge, I corrected her gently. It's about accountability and creating the kind of industry where talent and integrity matter more than gender or connections. Ryan and his colleagues have fostered a culture that systematically undervalues women's contributions. The acquisition will change that, regardless of my personal satisfaction in the process. After Eleanor left, I returned to my office to complete the day's final tasks before transitioning back to my Olivia Mitchell persona for the evening. As I reviewed security protocols for the Pinnacle integration, my secure phone buzzed with another surveillance update. Subject departing Westlake Grand, heading to Pinnacle offices. Ryan's lunch with Amber had lasted nearly 3 hours. I made a note to add this to his file, then began my own departure routine. By 6:30, I had changed back into my cover wardrobe, secured all sensitive materials, and was driving my modest sedan back toward Oak Hill. I stopped at an upscale grocery store to purchase ingredients for a dinner Ryan wouldn't be home to eat. Another detail in maintaining my cover. To anyone observing, I was simply a devoted wife preparing a nice meal for her hardworking husband. As I selected fresh vegetables and a cut of salmon, my mind was already mapping out the next day's activities. 8 days remained until the acquisition announcement. 8 days of maintaining the charade while finalizing the details that would transform both Pinnacle Solutions and my personal life. My phone chimed with a text from Ryan. Strategy session running late. Don't wait up. I texted back a believably supportive response, complete with a heart emoji that felt foreign to my fingertips. The location tracking app on his phone, which he didn't know I could access, showed him heading not toward Pinnacle's offices, but to the downtown address of Amber's new condo. By 7:30, I was back in our townhouse, preparing a dinner for one, while a carefully curated playlist of indie folk music, the kind Ryan associated with my basic tastes, played softly in the background. The domesticity of the scene would have been convincing to any observer, just as it had been convincing to Ryan for years. As I ate at our kitchen island, my secure tablet, disguised as a common e-reader, displayed the latest updates from Next Level's security team. The Pinnacle network penetration test had identified 17 critical vulnerabilities, confirming my assessment of their technical debt. Their entire security infrastructure would need to be rebuilt from the ground up once the acquisition was complete. My evening continued with what appeared to be online learning, ostensibly another Python tutorial, but actually a secure connection to Next Level's development environment, where I was refining a new encryption protocol. To anyone watching, I was simply a determined amateur practicing basic coding exercises. The reality was far more complex and consequential. At 9:45, my concentration was interrupted by the sound of the front door opening. Ryan wasn't supposed to be home this early. His trysts with Amber typically lasted until at least 11 on Tuesdays. I quickly switched my tablet display to a beginner's Python tutorial and adopted a slightly frustrated expression, as if struggling with a basic programming concept. Ryan appeared in the kitchen doorway, his expression uncharacteristically tense. "You're still up," he observed unnecessarily. I feigned mild surprise. "I thought you'd be in meetings all night. Is everything okay?" He moved to the refrigerator and pulled out a beer, avoiding my gaze. Victor pulled the plug on the Henderson acquisition. Apparently, they signed some kind of exclusive partnership with a competitor. The whole strategy has to be reworked. I allowed a look of sympathetic concern to cross my face, though internally I was noting that Next Level's partnership with Henderson had achieved exactly its intended purpose. "I'm sorry to hear that. You've been working on that deal for months." Ryan took a long swallow of his beer, his frustration evident. "The worst part is, nobody saw this coming. Our intelligence team completely missed the signals." He loosened his tie with a sharp, angry gesture. "Now we look like amateurs to the board." "That's awful," I said softly, closing my tablet as if giving him my full attention. "What happens next?" "Damage control, emergency strategy sessions, Victor's on the warpath." He ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, disrupting it in a way that would have been endearing if I didn't know where he'd been an hour earlier. "The next few days are going to be hell." I nodded sympathetically, thinking of how much more chaotic his life would become in 8 days. "Can I do anything to help?" He glanced at my closed tablet and smirked, momentarily distracted from his professional concerns. "Unless you've suddenly become a corporate strategy expert or learned how to code overnight, probably not." And there it was. Even in moments of stress, his instinct was to diminish me. It was so habitual he probably didn't even recognize he was doing it anymore. I offered a self-deprecating smile. "Fair point, but I could at least make sure you're well fed during the crisis." This was the dynamic he found comfortable, me in a supportive domestic role while he tackled the real challenges of business. It had been our pattern for so long that any deviation would have triggered his suspicion. "Sure," he said absently, already pulling out his phone to check messages. "Whatever. I'm going to grab a shower." As he headed upstairs, I noted that he hadn't asked a single question about my day or my activities. This selective disinterest had been a cornerstone of our relationship. His career and concerns took precedence, while mine were treated as inconsequential. Hobbies at best, invisible at worst. I waited until I heard the shower running before retrieving my secure phone from its hiding place and sending a brief update to Grace. Henderson partnership achieved desired outcome. Pinnacle strategy in disarray. Maintain acquisition timeline. Her response came moments later. Understood. Security protocols updated for accelerated transition if necessary. I returned the phone to its hiding place and resumed my position. At the kitchen island, the Python tutorial once again displayed on my tablet. When Ryan returned downstairs 20 minutes later, freshly showered and in loungewear, I was exactly where he expected me to be, playing the role he had cast me in years ago. "Any progress with your programming thing?" he asked, gesturing vaguely at my tablet while opening another beer. "A little," I replied with manufactured enthusiasm. "I'm trying to understand functions better." He leaned against the counter, an indulgent smile playing at his lips. "Functions, huh? That's pretty basic stuff, Liv. If you're struggling with that, maybe technology isn't really your thing." I had, in fact, written my first complex function at age 13 and had authored several widely used security algorithms by the time I met Ryan. The condescension in his tone would have been grating if it weren't so predictable, and if I didn't know how completely the dynamic would shift in 8 days. "Maybe you're right," I sighed, playing into his perception. "But I want to at least understand the fundamentals. It seems so important in today's world." Ryan's expression softened into that particular blend of pity and affection he reserved for what he perceived as my cute but futile efforts. "Look, not everyone is cut out for technical work. You have other strengths." "Like what?" I asked, genuinely curious about how he perceived me after all this time. He hesitated. clearly, searching for something positive that wouldn't contradict his fundamental underestimation of me. "You're supportive, organized, good with people." He shrugged. "Those are valuable too, in their way." The faint praise was somehow more revealing than his outright dismissals. In his mind, I was essentially a glorified assistant, useful in maintaining his domestic comfort, but fundamentally incapable of the kind of work he valued. "Thank you," I replied, infusing my voice with the gratitude he expected. "That means a lot." He nodded, satisfied that he had dispensed appropriate encouragement to his struggling spouse. "I'm heading to bed. Tomorrow's going to be brutal with this Henderson situation." He finished his beer and placed the bottle in the recycling bin. "Don't stay up too late with that programming stuff. Some concepts just take time to sink in." After he went upstairs, I remained at the kitchen island, reflecting on the layers of irony in our interaction. In 8 days, Ryan would discover that the wife he had been helping with basic programming concepts was actually a recognized authority in cybersecurity, leading a company that was about to acquire his. The revelation would be jarring enough on its own. Combined with the evidence of his financial misconduct and infidelity, it would completely upend his carefully constructed self-image as the successful provider married to an adorably inept, aspiring techie. I closed the Python tutorial and activated the secure mode on my tablet, reviewing the final acquisition documents once more. Everything was proceeding according to plan, despite the minor complication of Pinnacle's accelerated distress over the Henderson partnership. If anything, their strategic disarray would make the transition smoother. They would be less likely to mount any kind of resistance to the acquisition. After completing my review, I secured the tablet and headed upstairs. Ryan was already asleep, his breathing deep and regular. I slipped into bed beside him, maintaining the physical proximity our marriage still required while feeling the emotional distance that had grown into an unbridgeable chasm. As I lay in the darkness, I thought about Eleanor's caution regarding revenge. This wasn't about revenge, not entirely. It was about accountability, about addressing a culture of discrimination and dismissal that Ryan and his colleagues perpetuated. The personal satisfaction I would feel was secondary to the broader change the acquisition would bring. Still, I couldn't deny the anticipation I felt when I thought about the moment Ryan would finally see me, truly see me, for who I was. Not the supportive, struggling wife he had constructed in his mind, but the capable, successful executive who had built something far more valuable than he could comprehend. 7 days remained until that moment. 7 more days of playing small, of accepting his condescension, of pretending to be less than I was. After 4 years of this performance, 7 days seemed manageable, even as part of me longed to end the charade immediately. I closed my eyes, my mind already mapping out the next day's careful choreography of appearances versus reality. In the morning, I would once again become Olivia Mitchell, supportive wife and aspiring programmer. But for now, in the darkness of early night, I allowed myself to be Liv Chen, CEO and strategic architect of a corporate acquisition that would send shockwaves through Westlake's business community and through the foundation of my soon-to-be ex-husband's carefully constructed world. The next morning unfolded with its usual choreographed precision. Ryan left early for crisis meetings at Pinnacle, barely acknowledging me beyond a distracted goodbye. His mind was clearly consumed with the Henderson debacle, a professional crisis that would soon be overshadowed by personal and financial ones of far greater magnitude. After his departure, I moved through my morning routine efficiently, transforming from Olivia Mitchell to Liv Chen with practiced ease. By 8:30, I was in my real office at Next Level, reviewing the latest security assessments with my core team. Pinnacle's network traffic showed unusual patterns overnight, reported Alex, my head of intelligence. They appeared to be conducting emergency audits of their client relationships, likely trying to identify other vulnerabilities like the Henderson situation. Predictable, I nodded, studying the data visualization on the main screen. Are they getting close to identifying our connection to Henderson? Not even warm, Alex confirmed with professional satisfaction. The partnership was structured through 3 separate entities. They're looking in entirely wrong directions. Good. Maintain monitoring, but don't interfere. Their disarray works to our advantage. I turned to Grace, who had just entered with a tablet in hand. Updates? The board has requested a pre-acquisition briefing for tomorrow morning. Legal has the final paperwork ready for signatures, and HR has completed the transition protocols for all Pinnacle personnel. She paused, then added, including the specialized packet for Ryan. I acknowledged this with a slight nod, keeping my expression neutral despite the momentary tightening in my chest. The specialized packet contained not only Ryan's termination notice but comprehensive documentation of his financial misconduct, unauthorized disclosures of company information to Amber, and, of course, the $167,000 transfer from our joint savings. Schedule the board briefing for 9 a.m. tomorrow, I decided, and confirm the security teams understand the accelerated timeline may be in play. If Pinnacle's crisis management becomes too erratic, we may need to move before day 7. The morning progressed with intensive planning sessions, technical reviews, and coordination with the financial team handling the acquisition mechanics. Unlike the superficial strategizing I had glimpsed at Pinnacle, these discussions involved deep technical expertise and rigorous analysis. We weren't just acquiring a company. We were preparing to transform it from the inside out. At 12:15, I received an unexpected text from Ryan. Need to talk. Meeting canceled. Coming home for lunch. This deviation from routine was concerning. Ryan never came home during work days, especially not during a corporate crisis. Had he somehow discovered something about the acquisition? About Next Level? About me? I quickly texted Grace. Ryan coming home unexpectedly. May need to accelerate. Stay alert. Her response was immediate. Teams on standby. Security protocols ready. I left the office immediately, changing back into my Olivia wardrobe in the secure transition room before driving home. My mind raced through contingency scenarios. If Ryan had somehow learned about Next Level or my role, we would need to trigger the acquisition immediately, rather than waiting the planned 7 days. I arrived home 15 minutes before Ryan was due, quickly arranging the scene to match my supposed activities for the day. Online learning materials spread across the kitchen island, a half-finished cup of tea, notes in the deliberately unpolished handwriting I used for my cover identity. When I heard his key in the lock, I was seated at the island, my expression calibrated to show surprise and mild concern. Ryan burst through the door with uncharacteristic energy, his face animated in a way I hadn't seen in months. You're not going to believe what happened, he announced without preamble. Relief washed through me as I realized this wasn't about my cover being blown. Something else had triggered this unusual behavior. What is it? I asked, closing my laptop as if giving him my full attention. Victor is out, he declared, loosening his tie with a triumphant gesture. The board called an emergency session this morning about the Henderson disaster. They held Victor responsible for the intelligence failure and asked for his immediate resignation. I managed an appropriately shocked expression. That's dramatic. What does it mean for you? Ryan's smile widened as he poured himself a celebratory glass of whiskey at 12:30 in the afternoon. It means, my dear, that you are looking at Pinnacle's new interim chief revenue officer. He raised his glass in a self-congratulatory toast. The youngest CRO in company history. The irony was almost too perfect. The board had promoted Ryan to replace Victor, not knowing that in less than a week, both positions would cease to exist under the new organizational structure I had designed. That's incredible, I gasped, manufacturing the appropriate level of awe and excitement. I'm so proud of you. Ryan basked in my fabricated admiration, taking a long sip of his whiskey. The board said they were impressed with my strategic foresight in questioning the Henderson approach. He laughed sharply. I didn't, of course, but I'm not about to correct them when it lands me in the C-suite. This casual admission of taking credit for others' insights was so characteristic of Ryan that I almost laughed. Instead, I maintained my supportive spouse persona, asking appropriate questions about his new responsibilities and compensation. The salary bump is significant, he boasted, refilling his glass. And the equity package is substantial. We're talking 7 figures, Liv. He paused, eyeing me with sudden calculation. Though that remains between us for now, the paperwork isn't finalized yet. I nodded earnestly, knowing that the equity would be worthless once Next Level completed the acquisition. Of course, I won't say a word. Ryan's expression shifted, becoming more serious. This changes things, Liv. With this kind of position and compensation? He hesitated, then continued with practiced sincerity. I know you've been trying with these coding classes and tech tutorials, but maybe it's time to accept that some fields just aren't for everyone. Here it was, the condescension wrapped. In concern that had characterized so much of our relationship, even in his moment of triumph, he couldn't resist the opportunity to remind me of my supposed limitations. What do you mean? I asked, though I already knew exactly where this was headed. I mean, he said, his tone gentle but patronizing, that with my new position, there's really no financial need for you to keep struggling with technology concepts that clearly don't come naturally to you. You could focus on things you're actually good at. Like what? I prompted, curious to hear his assessment. He shrugged, the gesture dismissive despite his attempt at kindness. I don't know. Decorating? Event planning? Maybe some kind of community volunteering? The point is, you don't need to force yourself into a technical field just because it's trendy. Some people are built for it, some aren't. The casual certainty with which he assigned me to the aren't category would have been infuriating if it weren't so predictable, and if I didn't know how completely this dynamic would reverse in the very near future. That's thoughtful of you, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. I'll definitely think about it. Ryan seemed satisfied with this response, interpreting it as acquiescence rather than the placeholder it was. Good. Now I can't stay long. The board wants a complete strategic review by tomorrow morning, and I need to get back to put my team on it. He downed the rest of his whiskey and straightened his tie. Don't wait up tonight. This promotion is worth celebrating properly. The subtle shift in his expression told me exactly how he planned to celebrate, with Amber, using his new title and compensation package to further impress his mistress. The $167,000 condo down payment had been just the beginning of his financial indiscretions. Congratulations again, I said, standing to give him the expected kiss on the cheek. You deserve this. After he left, I immediately contacted Grace with the update. Ryan promoted to interim CRO following Victor's forced resignation. Accelerated timeline may be necessary before he can make significant organizational changes. Her response was swift. Understood. Moving acquisition preparation to high priority. Board meeting tomorrow becomes critical. I spent the afternoon recalibrating our acquisition strategy to account for this new development. Ryan's promotion actually simplified certain aspects of the transition. As interim CRO, he would have access to higher-level information, but wouldn't have had time to establish the kind of deep relationships that might complicate the leadership change. By evening, I had finalized the accelerated timeline with my executive team and secured board approval for potential early action. Instead of 7 days, we might now be looking at just 3 or 4 before the acquisition was announced. Ryan didn't return home that night as I had anticipated. His location tracking showed him at Amber's downtown condo until nearly 3 a.m., then at a hotel near Pinnacle's offices rather than returning to Oak Hill. He sent a text at 11 p.m. Working through the night on strategy review. Staying at hotel near office. We'll call tomorrow. The lie was so unnecessary and yet so consistent with his pattern of behavior that it barely registered as an offense anymore. In fact, his absence was convenient, allowing me to work uninterrupted on Next Level's acquisition preparations. The next morning, I arrived at the Next Level offices early for the critical board meeting. Dressed in my actual executive attire, a tailored charcoal suit that projected authority and competence, I reviewed the final presentation with Grace before the board members arrived. The Pinnacle leadership shakeup actually accelerates our integration strategy, I explained as the board assembled. With Ryan Mitchell now in an interim C-suite position, the organizational structure is more fluid. We can implement our planned changes with less resistance. Eleanor Walsh studied me carefully. And you're certain this development doesn't complicate the personal aspects of the situation? If anything, it clarifies them, I replied evenly. Ryan's promotion, combined with his continued financial indiscretions and his overnight stay with Ms. Collins, provides additional documentation for both the professional transition and my personal legal proceedings. The board reviewed the updated acquisition timeline, asking pointed questions about risk management and integration challenges. Unlike Pinnacle's board, which had promoted Ryan largely on optics and politics, Next Level's governance team demanded substantive answers and strategic clarity. We're prepared to move as early as day 4 if necessary, I concluded. All teams are on standby, and the legal framework is in place. We can trigger the acquisition protocol with 6 hours' notice. After unanimous board approval, I spent the rest of the day in detailed planning sessions with the transition team. By late afternoon, everything was in place for an accelerated timeline if Ryan's promotion triggered any actions that might complicate our strategy. I was preparing to transition back to my Olivia persona when my secure phone buzzed with an alert. Urgent. Pinnacle executive team calling emergency session for tomorrow morning. Complete reorganization planned. This was moving even faster than I had anticipated. Ryan wasn't wasting any time in reshaping Pinnacle according to his vision, a vision that would be rendered irrelevant within days. I immediately convened my core team. We need to move the timeline forward, I announced, displaying the intelligence report on the main screen. Ryan is planning a comprehensive reorganization that could complicate our integration strategy. Grace nodded, already typing rapid instructions on her tablet. How soon? I considered the implications carefully. 3 days from now, Tuesday morning. That gives us enough time to finalize all preparations while preventing any significant structural changes at Pinnacle. The security team was already prepared for acceleration, Alex confirmed. We can have all protocols in place by Monday evening. As the team dispersed to implement the accelerated timeline, Eleanor approached me with a concerned expression. 3 days, she observed. Are you ready for what that means personally? There's no going back once this is in motion. I met her gaze steadily. I've been ready for 4 years, Eleanor. The only question was timing, and Ryan's promotion has forced our hand. Professionally and personally, this is the right move. She studied me for a moment longer, then nodded with evident respect. Then let's make sure it's executed flawlessly. I returned home that evening to find Ryan already there, surrounded by papers spread across our dining table, his expression intent as he made notes on organizational charts and strategy documents. He looked up as I entered, his face showing surprise at my presence, as if he had forgotten I lived there too. I arrived at Next Level's headquarters at precisely 6:45 a.m. The executive floor was already bustling with focused activity, security, teams reviewing protocols, legal representatives organizing documentation, and transition coordinators finalizing their deployment strategies. After 4 years of meticulous planning, today was the day everything would change. Grace met me at the elevator, tablet in hand. All systems go, she reported as we walked toward the command center. Security teams are in position at Pinnacle. Legal has filed the final acquisition documents. The press release is queued for 9:05 a.m. "And Ryan?" I asked, accepting a coffee from my assistant. "Arrived at Pinnacle 10 minutes ago. He came directly from Amber's condo and is currently in his office preparing for what he believes will be his restructuring announcement." I nodded, feeling a curious calm despite the momentous nature of what was about to unfold. After years of playing the underestimated wife, of accepting Ryan's condescension, of watching him drain our savings account to fund his mistress's downtown condo, justice was finally at hand. The command center was a masterpiece of technological efficiency. Multiple screens displayed live feeds from Pinnacle's offices, security team positions, and market indicators that would soon register the impact of our announcement. My executive team was assembled, each member responsible for a critical aspect of today's acquisition. 90 minutes until execution, I announced, taking my position at the central console. "Final status reports, please." One by one, department heads confirmed their readiness. Security, legal, human resources, communications, technical integration. Unlike the posturing and politics I'd observed at Pinnacle's executive meetings, this briefing was precise, substantive, and focused on actual outcomes rather than appearances. Eleanor Walsh, my mentor and board chair, approached as the briefing concluded. "The personal elements have been isolated from the corporate transition?" "Completely," I confirmed. "Ryan's termination packet includes the standard separation. Documents plus private evidence of his financial misconduct. That conversation happens separately from the corporate announcement." Eleanor studied me with the perceptiveness that had made her such a valuable advisor. "I've overseen dozens of acquisitions, but never one with such personal dimensions. Are you prepared for his reaction?" I considered her question carefully. As prepared as possible. Security protocols are in place. The evidence is irrefutable. Beyond that. I shrugged slightly. His response is not my primary concern. The successful integration of these companies is. At 8:30, our satellite monitoring showed increased activity at Pinnacle's headquarters. Executives were arriving for what they believed would be Ryan's triumphant restructuring announcement. Nathan Wilson, recently promoted to Chief of Staff, was setting up the presentation in the main conference room, occasionally checking his phone with evident satisfaction. "Mitchell is gathering his executive team," reported Alex from security. "They're assembling in the main conference room for their 9 a.m. announcement." Perfect timing. Ryan's entire leadership team would be gathered in one place when our acquisition became public. "Transition teams, prepare for deployment," I instructed. "Security, confirm all access points covered. Communications, prepare for market response." As 9 a.m. approached, I changed from my standard executive attire into the suit I had selected specifically for this moment. A precisely tailored charcoal ensemble that projected authority, competence, and unquestionable executive presence. This would be Ryan's first glimpse of the real me, not the supportive but technically inept wife he believed he had married. "T-5 minutes, Grace announced, handing me the secure phone that would trigger our coordinated actions. "All teams report ready." I took a final moment to center myself, to acknowledge the magnitude of what was about to unfold. This wasn't merely about personal justice, though that aspect was undeniable. It was about transforming two companies and creating something better than either had been individually. "Execute," I commanded at precisely 9 a.m. Multiple actions triggered simultaneously. The press release announcing Next Level's acquisition of Pinnacle Solutions was distributed to financial media worldwide. Security teams at Pinnacle activated their access protocols, securing critical areas and preparing for potential resistance. Legal representatives electronically delivered acquisition notifications to Pinnacle's board members. On our main screen, we could see the moment awareness hit the Pinnacle executive conference room. Ryan was mid-presentation, gesturing at a slide titled "Our Vision Forward," when phones began buzzing throughout the room. Confusion spread visibly as executives checked their devices, expressions morphing from confidence to bewilderment. Ryan stopped speaking mid-sentence, pulling out his own phone with a growing frown. The camera captured his expression, shifting from confusion to disbelief as he apparently read the acquisition announcement. "Security teams reporting ready for entry," Alex confirmed. "Transitional leadership team in position." "Proceed," I authorized, standing to prepare for my own departure to Pinnacle headquarters. On screen, we watched as next-level security personnel entered the conference room professionally, but firmly. The lead officer approached Ryan directly, extending a sealed envelope. "Mr. Mitchell," we heard through the audio feed, "I'm here to escort you to the main boardroom. Next Level Security has acquired Pinnacle Solutions, effective immediately. This contains initial information regarding your separation from the company." The shock on Ryan's face was profound. Nathan appeared to be protesting vehemently while other executives sat in stunned silence or frantically worked their phones seeking confirmation. "It's time," Grace said quietly, holding the door for me and my executive team. The drive to Pinnacle's headquarters took precisely 12 minutes. During that time, our transition teams were already deploying throughout the building, securing systems, addressing employee questions, and beginning the integration process we had so carefully designed. As our vehicles pulled into Pinnacle's executive garage, I received confirmation that Ryan and his leadership team had been escorted to the main boardroom where they were awaiting the arrival of Next Level's executives. They had been provided minimal information, just enough to understand an acquisition had occurred, but not the complete details of the new organizational structure. And certainly nothing about who would be walking through those boardroom doors. I entered the building through the executive entrance, surrounded by my leadership team and security detail. Pinnacle employees watched with a mixture of apprehension and curiosity as we passed, clearly aware that a significant corporate change was underway. Outside the boardroom, Grace provided a final update. "All terminated executives are present. Security has maintained appropriate protocols. Transition packets are ready for distribution." I nodded, taking a deep breath before this final confrontation. "Let's proceed." The boardroom doors opened, and I entered first, followed by my executive team. The shock that rippled through the room was palpable. Ryan's expression transformed from angry determination to complete disbelief as he recognized me in my executive attire. "Good morning," I began, my voice carrying the quiet authority that had become my leadership signature at Next Level. "I'm Olivia Chen, founder and CEO of Next Level Security. As of 9 o'clock this morning, Next Level has completed its acquisition of Pinnacle Solutions." Ryan half rose from his chair, his face flushing. "Olivia, what the hell is this? Some kind of joke?" "Not at all," I replied calmly, taking my position at the head of the table as my team distributed transition packets to each executive. "These documents outline the acquisition terms and your individual separation agreements." Nathan found his voice, though it cracked slightly. "Separation? You can't just come in here and—" "We can and we have," interrupted Eleanor Walsh, providing the board-level authority that reinforced our position. "The acquisition has been legally executed with full approval from major shareholders and regulatory compliance." Ryan remained focused entirely on me, his expressions cycling through confusion, anger, and dawning comprehension. "You all. This time, you were." "Yes," I confirmed simply. "While you were building Pinnacle, I was building Next Level. While you were dismissing my technical abilities, I was developing security systems that now protect 40% of the Fortune 500. And while you were transferring our joint savings to your Mistress's condo account, I was preparing to acquire your company." The silence that followed was profound. Several executives stared at their separation packets without opening them, while others looked between Ryan and me with growing comprehension. "The acquisition is not personal," I continued, addressing the entire room. It's a strategic business decision that benefits both companies' clients and most of the employees. Each of you is being terminated based on documented performance issues, ethical violations, or redundancy in the new organizational structure. I turned to Ryan, meeting his gaze directly. Your termination, however, includes additional documentation regarding financial misconduct, unauthorized disclosure of proprietary information to external parties, and breach of fiduciary duty. You'll find the evidence quite comprehensive. Ryan finally found his voice, though it trembled with barely controlled rage. You've been lying to me for years, playing some kind of twisted game while pretending to be— I never lied about my capabilities, I corrected him calmly. You assumed my limitations. You dismissed my interests as hobbies. You explained basic concepts to me that I had mastered decades ago. Those were your choices, Ryan, not my deceptions. His face flushed darker. Our marriage, was any of it real? I considered the question carefully, aware of the silent audience surrounding us. It was real until you betrayed it. The joint savings account you emptied for Amber's condo was meant for starting our family. That money represented my trust in our future together. Ryan's expression shifted, calculation replacing shock as he attempted to regain control of the situation. This won't stand. I'll fight this. The board won't— The board has already approved the acquisition, Eleanor interjected smoothly. In fact, they're meeting with our integration team right now to discuss the transition process. I gestured to the security personnel waiting discreetly by the door. You'll be escorted to HR to complete your separation process. Your personal belongings will be packed and delivered to you. Your access has already been revoked. As Ryan and the other executives were led from the boardroom, he paused at the door, turning back with a final question that seemed torn from somewhere deeper than his anger. Why like this? Why not just divorce me when you found out about Amber? I met his gaze steadily. Because this was never just about us, Ryan. It was about the culture you and your colleagues created at Pinnacle. A culture that systematically devalued technical expertise, that rewarded political maneuvering over innovation, that treated women as decorative accessories rather than equal professionals. The company needed transformation, not just its executives. After they departed, Grace approached with the transition timeline. All systems proceeding as planned. The all-staff announcement is prepared for 10:30. I nodded, taking a moment, to acknowledge what had just transpired before focusing on the integration challenges ahead. The confrontation with Ryan had been necessary, but represented only a small part of the day's objectives. Over the next several hours, I led a comprehensive transformation of Pinnacle's operations. The all-staff meeting revealed not only the KIE acquisition, but our vision for integration, retention of most positions, significant investment in technical infrastructure, and a cultural reset that would prioritize innovation and collaboration over hierarchy and politics. By late afternoon, the initial shock had given way to cautious optimism among most employees. The market had responded favorably to the acquisition announcement, with analysts praising the strategic fit between the company's capabilities. As I concluded meetings with departmental leaders, Eleanor found me in what had been Ryan's corner office, a space that would be converted to a collaborative work area in our new floor plan. "How are you holding up?" she asked, closing the door behind her. I considered the question honestly. Better than expected. The operational aspects are proceeding smoothly. The personal confrontation was necessary but not particularly satisfying. Eleanor nodded thoughtfully. Revenge rarely provides the closure we imagine it will. What happens now, with Ryan? The divorce proceedings begin tomorrow, I replied. The financial documentation makes the case straightforward. Beyond that, he'll need to build a new life, just as I will. And what does that life look like for you, now that you don't need to maintain the pretense? I looked out over the city skyline, considering her question. Authenticity, Integration. Of the professional and personal. No more compartmentalization or strategic diminishment. She smiled with genuine warmth. That sounds like a worthy next chapter. As evening approached, I returned to Next Level headquarters for final debriefings with my executive team. The day's operations had been executed with remarkable precision, each element of our comprehensive plan unfolding as designed. Ryan Mitchell has completed processing, Grace reported. Security confirmed his departure from the building at 4:15. His personal belongings will be delivered to his hotel tomorrow. I nodded, unsurprised that he had chosen a hotel rather than Amber's condo. Our surveillance had captured a heated argument between them shortly after his termination. Evidently, his sudden change in financial and professional status had impacted her perception of their relationship. And the Oak Hill townhouse? I asked, referring to what had been our marital home. Security systems reconfigured as requested, confirmed Alex. New access codes implemented. Your essential items have been relocated to the downtown residence. The day concluded with a final executive meeting where we reviewed the integration timeline for the coming weeks. Unlike the superficial strategy sessions I had witnessed at Pinnacle, these discussions were substantive and forward-looking, focused on genuine value creation rather than political positioning. As the team dispersed, I found myself alone in my office experiencing a moment of unexpected reflection. The culmination of 4 years of careful planning had arrived exactly as designed. The acquisition executed flawlessly, Ryan's misconduct documented comprehensively, the corporate transformation underway. Yet the emotional resolution felt somehow different than I had anticipated. There was satisfaction in justice served, certainly, and vindication in the professional recognition that had been so long deferred. But there was also a curious emptiness, where I had expected fullness, as if the energy dedicated to maintaining my dual identity had created a vacuum now that integration was possible. Grace appeared at my door, interrupting these thoughts. Car is ready whenever you are. Do you need anything else this evening? I shook my head, gathering my belongings. No, thank you. Tomorrow we focus entirely on forward integration. The past is officially closed. As I rode the elevator down to the private garage, I reflected on the day's events with growing clarity. The acquisition of Pinnacle had never been primarily about Ryan. Despite the personal catalyst his betrayal had provided, it had been about creating something better, a company where technical excellence was valued appropriately, where gender didn't determine credibility, where substance mattered more than appearance. The personal satisfaction of seeing Ryan's shock when he finally recognized who I truly was, that had been a momentary pleasure, but ultimately secondary to the larger transformation now underway. My driver was waiting with the car door open. Where to this evening, Ms. Chen? For the first time in 4 years, I didn't need to consider which version of myself I needed to present, or which role I needed to play. There was just me, Olivia Chen, exactly as I was, without strategic diminishment or calculated performance. Downtown, please, I directed. It's time to go home. The city lights blurred gently as we pulled away from Pinnacle's headquarters. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, integration complexities, market reactions, the inevitable adjustments as two corporate cultures merged into something stronger than either had been individually. But tonight, I could simply be. The pretense was over. The truth had finally emerged. And while revenge might have initiated this journey, something far more valuable had emerged from it. The opportunity to build something authentic, both professionally and personally, without the constraints of others' limited perceptions. As we drove through the evening traffic, I felt a weight lifting that I hadn't fully acknowledged was there. The burden of being underestimated, of deliberately allowing that underestimation to persist, had been heavier than I realized. Ryan had lost his job, his marriage, and his carefully constructed self-image all in a single day. but what I had gained was far more valuable than what he had lost. I had reclaimed not just financial justice, but the freedom to exist without pretense, to lead without hiding, to achieve without apologizing. The acquisition of Pinnacle Solutions would make headlines in tomorrow's financial press. The divorce filing would generate its own ripples in our social circles. But the true transformation was internal and already complete. The integration of divided selves into a whole person who no longer needed to play small to accommodate someone else's ego. The car turned onto the downtown avenue where my new residence awaited, a space designed according to my actual preferences rather than Ryan's expectations. A space where I could be fully myself without calculation or performance. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. But tonight, authenticity was enough. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up, just click and check them out.